So with us today we have Sarah Cox, who's an award-winning journalist and author based in Victoria, BC. Sarah is the author of the 2018 book entitled Reaching the Peace, the Sightsee Dam, and A Valley Stand Against Big Hydro. The book won a BC Book Prize and was a finalist for the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing and the George Rya Award for Social Awareness in Literature. Sarah is a reporter for the online publication The Norwal, which covers Canada's natural world. She writes about energy and environmental issues, and she has covered the Kiosk Dam and Muskrat Falls Dam, as well as the Sightsee Dam. So she's going to be moderating this session for us, and we welcome her to Manitoba, to our territory here in Manitoba, and I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Ramona. It's an honor to be here today in the presence of so many troublemakers. I know it's often a lonely slog to be working away on hydro issues, and I'm very grateful to Juanis Gatan for bringing us all together today. And I thought we'd start by just asking everybody from hydro-impacted communities who's in the room to just stand up, please. So if you're from a hydro-impacted community, could you stand up? Thank you. So today on this panel, we're here to talk about 3 hydro projects in Canada which are either under construction or, in the case of Muskrat Falls, have just finished construction. And these projects are very far away from each other geographically. We've got the Muskrat Falls Dam in Labrador, we have the Kiosk Dam in northern Manitoba, and we have the Sightsee Dam in northeastern BC. But they all share some very startling similarities. You could call them the terrible triplets. What they have in common is that they're all hugely over budget. There's no sound business case for any of the 3 dams. The energy that they produce will never be sold for anything close to what it costs to produce it. And they have absolutely devastating impacts on the environment, including destroying habitat for hundreds of species that are already vulnerable to extinction at a time when we're in the middle of a global biodiversity crisis. And they all have an absolutely profound and deep impact on Indigenous communities. Indigenous communities who have already suffered from previous dams on these rivers. And that's what we're going to hear about today from the panelists. So I'm going to introduce them, and then I think that the format that we can follow after a consultation with the panelists is that I will ask them a question and give them each a turn to answer that question, and we'll leave some time for audience questions and discussion at the end. So first of all, I would like to introduce Connie Greyeyes at the far end. Connie Greyeyes is from Fort St. John in northeastern BC. She's currently the Northern Case Manager for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls with the First Nation Health Authority. And she also works for the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. Connie is a Cree woman who hails from the Big Stone Cree Nation in Wabasca des Marais. She's a grassroots activist and a community advocate for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, which has led her to work with communities facing gender violence associated with resource extraction. She has lived experience with hydro development in her community and has collaborated with Amnesty International and New York Factory First Nation in researching and speaking about these issues. Sitting beside Connie is Denise Cole. Denise Cole is a Two-Spirit land protector of mixed Inuit descent from southern Labrador, now living in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador. She's a board member of the Grand Riverkeeper Labrador and plays a communications liaison role with the Labrador Land Protectors. Denise stands in resistance to projects that threaten water, land, lives, and cultures. Gifted the name Spotted Elk, Denise has been mentored by elders and guides to perform sacred ceremonies and walk a spiritual path as firekeeper and eagle whistle carrier. She's been involved in the resistance to the Lower Churchill Project since 2011, including the environmental assessment hearings and numerous nonviolent protection events and campaigns. Denise faces civil charges for performing sacred ceremony on ancestral lands occupied by the Crown Corporation, Nalcor, which is protected by a Supreme Court injunction. She comes to us today with clean hands and straight eyes, with goals to build our common circle of solidarity. Robert Spence was unable to join us today, but I'm happy to say that we have Isla Desbrow from Split Lake, Tatasquiac. She's a strong advocate for her community. And sitting beside her, also from Tatasquiac, is Eunice Beardy, an elder who wants to preserve land and water for the unborn. Eunice is a fluent Cree speaker. So please welcome our panelists. So I wanted to start by asking everybody to give us a brief description of the hydro project that is most recently impacting their communities. What is this project? Where is it? And what are some of its impacts? And so maybe we'll just start with Connie and go along the table here.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank Waniscatan for inviting me here to speak so freely and openly about the Site C Dam mega disaster that's happening right now in my community in northeastern BC, in Fort St. John, British Columbia. The dam point is exactly 7 miles from my front door, and there's several Indigenous communities that will be affected by this dam. It has been within the courts for upwards of over 20, I don't even know how many years. It's been shut down many times, but this time they finally had gotten it approved and pushed through. The effects, we're already feeling the effects of this project with the workers coming in and the social impacts that these projects have on communities, specifically on women and girls, which is where I have centered most of my work. Has always been on the impacts on Indigenous women, girls, and communities of resource extraction. Most people don't understand that when these kinds of projects come to town, they drive the prices of everything: housing, food, basic needs, healthcare, everything right through the roof. And unless you're an oil field worker in my community, you live in deep poverty. And it's unnecessary, especially with a project like the Site C Dam that is already well over budget by $2 billion or something. And it's so unnecessary for our communities. There's 2 other dams that are built on our Peace River right now, and this is the 3rd of, I believe, 5 that they have planned. So the social impacts that the women and girls in our communities are facing are real, and that has been the reason that I travel and speak to on panels and in workshops, and right now creating a toolkit, an Indigenous Women Gender-Based Analysis toolkit for the province of BC to be used in the Environmental Assessment Act for government and industry, as well as nations to use to go into meaningful discussions and negotiations, because our consent is not the same as their consent. So that's hugely important to me.
Let's see how Tony got me close to the microphone. Usually I don't get complaints about my voice being soft. Again, Nakamik, thank you for inviting me here. It's a real honor and a privilege to be able to share space with incredible people in an incredible circle. For myself, with Muskrat Falls, is phase 1 of a phase 2 hydro project known as the Lower Churchill project. This would be the second of 3. The first mega dam that's on the Churchill River is the Upper Churchill, which is owned by Hydro-Quebec. which was given to them by the Newfoundland government. Labrador is a very interesting territory that's cross-cultural and has had to sort of deal with, and a lot of people don't know where Labrador is. It's the eastern side. We share a border with Quebec, and we are owned by the colonial Newfoundland government. And I say owned because no one really asked us as Indigenous people when Confederation happened if we wanted to be given to the new province of Newfoundland. And that's been it's a big source of frustration for us on how things are done, because we became very clear, for example, the river that's known as the Churchill River now, that's a colonial name. Mistashibu is the traditional Innu name for that river. Grand River is the name that most traditionalists also, that's what I call it, is the Grand River. And since Confederation, there's been a real push to have that water dammed. It's the 7th largest river in Canada. And I could tell you all about the science and the politics and the economics and the government, all of those pieces of it. There's people more educated than me who could tell that story, who have taken me under the wing. One is towards the back of the room, Roberta Benningfield, who is the head of Grand River Keeper Labrador. I got involved in this when I was sent home by Mi'kmaq elders who said, you have a path in Labrador, and that's what led me to my Red Road. And I've been on it ever since, and once I went back to the river, I understood. And so for me, it's the same river that my brother drowned in this river many years ago. So I see it as sacred responsibility to not just perform ceremony, but to protect that river. And what has happened is this colonial government has worked with Crown Corporation. This is not a new story. So many of you stood up that you're in hydro-impacted communities, so you don't need me to tell you the story that we all share. Colonial government decided that they were going to make money off our river, and they didn't want to listen to us who live downstream. And they have found a way to whitewash it and just add an economic story to a cultural disaster. And Muskrat Falls is no different from that. I am about 30 kilometers downstream from Muskrat Falls. It is, as you said, almost constructed. We will, things that never make it to the media, of course, is that they are having issues with their construction, as they always have with these dams. They try to rush in and they try to do things. I say Mother Nature has another plan. And I believe that's what's happening when you destroy something that's sacred. Creator has a way of speaking back. And I think that's what brings most of us to these circles. So I was involved in the environmental assessment stages of it, and I watched how they basically, many of us for 3 days straight stood up and said, don't do this. And then the government decided they were going to do it anyway. And in doing so, this is one of the things I'm really curious about extending the conversation, because where they went to get their green light report was Manitoba Hydro. Manitoba Hydro has a lot of fingers into other mega dams that are happening in different parts of Canada. And I think us coming together, this is probably government and Crown Corporation's worst nightmare right in this room. So I'm really happy to be a part of that circle. Long story short, it is over budget. We are dealing with methyl mercury fallout. There was an agreement put in place that involved all 3 Indigenous groups. This is the other part of the politics that gets used against us in Labrador. We have Innu Nation, Nunatsiavut, and Nunatuavut. And these 3 groups have had many reasons and lots of historical trauma that's made it very hard to work together. And so trying to find where the balance is when colonial government continues to make deals with some and not with others, get consent from some but not with others, consult with some but not with others. And that's exactly what's happened with us. So they did make a methyl mercury agreement, and then government let it slip, and a mistake was made, and that mistake means methyl mercury is coming downstream to about 10,000 of us. And that's just those who are alive now. This is an intergenerational thing that will continue on. And basically, a permit didn't make its way through because somebody made a mistake. And of course, none of those people who made those decisions have to live with the consequences. That's us who live with those consequences. And we also have the North Spur. There's a similar thing. Site C is like our it's like a mirror reflection from coast to coast. But the whole unstable pieces of the riverbank, and the same thing with us, we have a thing called the North Spur. They have used it as a very important part of the dam infrastructure and continue to tell us, even though our traditional knowledge holders have said you can't make that hold, you can't build concrete on loose sand or quick clay, but they've not, and in doing so, there's now about 1,000 people who live in a newly formed flood zone who have no way out as far as any kind of real plan of what that could look like. I won't go on and on because I know you want to ask questions, so I will pass it on. I'm very honored to have an elder to the table as well.
I'm happy to say that Robert Spence has just arrived, and I just wanted to briefly introduce him. Welcome, Robert. Robert Spence is a harvester, artist, and is currently a band counselor for Tatasquia Cree Nation. He's been working closely with Winneskatan since it started and has developed close relationships with student researchers. He's been advocating on behalf of his community with regards to hydro injustices for most of his life. Robert seeks to safeguard the waters for future generations, and as such, his granddaughter is involved and featured in his work.
Nancy, kipapak, juetang kipapak iskoldis migasan. Ego mo yan mo sa mano magi-face paniguma. Oho ke paiga na. Amoy ustan mo hi. Ego daw tiyo si daw nagis-kisya. Ego daw nagis-kisya kanima. I'd like to greet everybody. I introduce my spirit name, and I don't translate my spirit name. That's between myself and Creator. But I'm here to speak about our water. I came to speak about what happened before, and we can't forget. We have to start there. As a little girl, I remember going down the lake in a canoe and scooping up water from the lake and drinking it. It was so clear, so pure. There was no hydro dams at the time. And slowly, they started making dams, which was very, very, it was a good thing in a way. But when you really look at it, it isn't. Yes, we have lights. That's what the dams provide us, these lights. We can turn on the light anytime. We don't have to do any work to do it. Just a simple switch. But that easiness of doing that, there's a lot of damage that comes with it, with our waters. I remember as a little girl, we used to throw nickels, dimes in the lake so we could see who would pick it up first. Today, you can't even see your hand under the water, it's so dirty. Our children can't swim like we used to as a little girl. The water was clean. We were taught to respect the water. Today, there is no respect for the water, and that's what we're fighting for. So that our children, the unborn, will see at least a little bit of clean water. We can't allow them to destroy our water anymore. And that's what I'm advocating for, is for everybody to work together. Yes, hydro makes money out of it, but in the same breath, they destroy us. There is so much destruction in my community now. every time I think about it or talk about it, I want to cry. The social injustices that were brought up already. With the dams comes drugs, alcohol, marriage breakups, discrimination. Those are the destructions, the real human destructions that the dams cause. And also the water, the things they put into the water. We're getting sick from it. I'm not going to talk about the rivers because this is our expert. He knows, he doesn't need a map to navigate around the waters. Our elders were the ones that taught him, the ones that are gone now. And they too said we need to work together, we can't destroy the water anymore. And as a woman, I advocate for the water because if there was no water, none of us would be here. Because it's the woman that brings life into the world. That child is in the water for 9 months. And that's one thing that Hydro doesn't even think about. So we need to preserve our water. We need to work together so that the water is no longer destroyed. Our water used to be clear, like this. Now it looks like mud. We used to be able to go down the beach, catch fish. That is no longer happening. The fish are being destroyed. Our animals are being destroyed. Their migration routes are being destroyed. They're confused. This is a very serious matter. Mother Earth is starting to fight back, so we need to help her. She's getting tired because we have children that are not born coming. We need to work together so that they have that clean life without the destruction. They need to have respect without being looked down on. There's so much of that going on in the dam at Kias Dam. Our young ones that go to work there, they're looked down upon. They're not very important, yet this is their land, our land that they're working on. And they're only used as slaves. They're not taught to continue on when the dam's finished. It's destroying our communities, family breakups. We didn't have that when I was a little girl. We need to start working together, loving each other, being kind to each other, and sharing. And we need to understand we have to start from Mother Earth, water, everything that Creator gave us. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Councillor Robert. And I thank you for listening to me. I could go on and on and on, but I was told I only have a little bit of time. But I don't want to use my elder rights to do that. I do respect the young ones. They're the ones that are going to be carrying on after I'm gone. That's it.
Elder from BCM. Ang pisiponis na iganin nito, inanas ko muna sa hao, inanas ko mamantuan sa minatagong tayo na hinan o danos kita ng mga kawagyan. Thank the Creator for bringing us all here today, for giving us this opportunity to share what we have, to learn from each other, to share what it is that we need to tell each other, to let each other know what it is that we're dealing with on a daily basis from our respective communities. You're going to have to bear with me. It's always difficult for me to share what it is that we go through on a daily basis in all of our communities and what we go through in ours. We all suffer the same injustices, inadequacies. Back home in our community, we can't even use our water for drinking water from the river and from the source anymore. We have E. coli warning signs posted all over our community along the shores. Something I thought I'd never see in my lifetime. Do not swim signs, E. coli warning. Warning kids to stay away from the water. We come from a place where we're all deeply affected by the water in several different ways. At several gatherings and workshops, water and wastewater, especially conference I attended, people were surprised to hear about the things that were happening to our people back home. One of them is this: the kids breaking up with rashes because they bathe in the water. And if they swim in it, the same thing happens. This is also another thing. The water's so dirty and so filthy. It's green, just like what Manitoba Hydro tells you, clean, green, renewable energy. It's green, all right, blue-green. There's fish that die in it. You can't even eat the fish from it no more. We fight the drug epidemic that's followed the development of kiosk. And because I'm one of the council members for our community that pushed the drug dealers out of our communities, especially the cocaine dealers, they try to send us strong messages that if we try to do our jobs as the leaders of our community, they will send us a message that they'll try to hurt us. And here's one of the messages where they came right to my doorstep about 12 o'clock at night and shot my dog right in front of the doorstep. Just to send a message to us to leave them alone. Everything that we're all affected by stems from the water. The water was supposed to be the answer to all of our people's prayers for what we needed in our community. Whenever I hear the word development, I cringe. To me, it's such a dirty, I'm not going to swear, sorry. I'm so used to swearing all the time. Such a dirty word. That's how I feel. For years and years, I've been taking pictures of the water all around our community. Looking at the changes going up from when I was just a little guy on a boat, on a chestnut boat with my late grandfather, John George Garson. It's true what our elder Eunice said. You could see it down for a long ways into the water. Now you can't even see 4 inches into the water. With the development of kiosk, it's brought social changes too. You know, I am one very pissed off individual. My son, Chayton, who has just turned 16, he's still with us, but his mental capacity is not what it used to be anymore because the drugs screwed up his life. He's in a sort of permanent state of psychosis. To me, my son is gone. He's there, but he's not there. The son I taught growing up to be a hunter is not the son that he is today. He is in a constant need to want to go out and find the drugs now. We're sitting up at night watching him, wondering if he's going to come home. Development, partnership agreements. That was a gun to the head. That's what that was. You either take this deal or you leave it. That's what our people were told. So they had no choice but to take from it from what they could get. But the picture that was painted, imagine a pretty picture on the side of the page. Beautiful picture of partnership, walking hand in hand with a little girl on Portage Avenue, spreading her arms out like that wall mural down Portage there. Beautiful green grass, blue skies, clean, clear water, nice shorelines. And then, as soon as you're handed the agreement from Hydro, here you go, that's what you get. They flipped it around on you and give you the opposite of what they thought our people were supposed to get. Development. It has its pros and it has its cons. But I'm never, ever gonna accept what he has done. Our ancestors' remains lay strewn all along the shorelines of the Nelson River in all of our territories. I'm sure it's like that, BC, all along the Nelson River, Churchill River, everywhere you go where there's dam development. And what they offer are skidoos with sleds built with rocks so you could go put over the remains of the ancestors. And yet we scream and cry for protection of our lands. And they treat us like beggars, asking for handouts. We are not beggars. We're only asking for what is right. To protect what it is that's sacred to us. We're not looking for handouts, how the South sees us. Every time I come to the boardrooms here in the South, it's always the same. The Southern politicians dictating and mandating and passing policies and making laws and legislations for the people who live in the North, who dictate to the people of the North. Totalitarian laws and rules and regulations and legislations. And here I'm looking at everything from the other side of the fence. I just came from the bush and found myself in a boardroom not too long ago. Seeing all of the things that are happening within the boardrooms is not right. How the hell are we supposed to take in stride the decisions that are made for us in the South that we have to live with and deal with every day in the North? That the Southern politicians have no idea of what they're doing. I don't know how it is that we can sum up everything that we feel in the time allotted, so I'm just going to leave it at that for now. That was it.
Thank you. I'm going to like to ask everybody to reflect briefly on the notion that all three governments and three publicly owned hydro corporations say that they have consulted extensively with Indigenous peoples affected by the three dams, and in the context of free, prior, and informed consent. How do you break through that barrier when the message going out to the public is that we have had adequate consultations? And how does that fit with the federal government's promise to harmonize federal laws with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? I know that's a big topic, but maybe if you could each just reflect on that, particularly in the context of that what is out there in the media and what many people believe is that consultations have happened.
I go for, oh, go ahead. I thought you were just going to go in the row, but go.
The Atascocita Cree Nation is located right smack into the center of all the developments. There's downstream, there's Kelsey, and not even a half hour boat ride, 45 minutes. There's the thing. Upstream is Eas. Upstream. And we're in the center of it all. And plus we're affected by the Churchill River diversion. And the consultation process that went through for Split Lake was 30%. 30% of the population, and the 30% of the population were all mostly most of our young people didn't know what they were signing or what they were voting for. They have come to me and told me, I'm sorry I signed it, I didn't know what I signed. And most of us that are sitting here, we were trying to educate people, but we were always being told that we were making trouble for our communities. Even we got together to go through that JKDA, that big binder. The first 3 pages, we had to try and understand ourselves, but and in that agreement it says draft, so we thought we could change it. But then the consultants and whatever came along and said, you can't change it, it's a frozen draft. It didn't say frozen, it said, but Manitoba Hydro and the consultants and the lawyers can change the Webster's dictionary on our people. And the scary part is our leaders, when they go into negotiations with Hydro, they have to sign a confidential agreement. Our leadership was voted in by the people. Our people have the right to know what was going on. So in the consultation process, they only wanted the people to see what they wanted to see. And to get the people into meetings, they had door prizes. And not knowing that the door prizes were counted as consulted. And when we tried to ask questions, we were shut down by our own community members. And most of the time we were ostracized. And right to the end of the day we signed the kiosk, and remember that day so clearly. We were outside protesting. Meanwhile, they had reporters, they had delegates, they had all the cremation partnership enter from the back of the arena where we didn't see them. And we were told we were using children to fight this, but yet they hired young people that were desperate for jobs, that needed income. I know my son was on the other side of security because he needed a job. And he knows how I feel. But that's the thing that comes to our First Nations is division. They only study the animals, but they've never studied the impacts of our people. They never did a community health assessment to count how the effects will be. But I work in the health field for the past 25 years, 26 years, and I see the impacts on our children. I see the impacts of people walking into the clinic. They look healthy, and the next day, I work for medical transportation. I'm in contact with the people that come in and out. Dialysis patients are so, diabetes is the worst I ever seen. And they study the animals, they study the fish, they even study the mice, rodents, bugs. Why not our people and the impact it has on our children. I have nightmares. Because I actually have to take an antidepressant. Because these nightmares haunt me. Because you know when you see on TV, you see a little child in the desert scooping up water from the puddle. That's us. Where are our children going to get water? We fought, I don't know how many protests we did, but we were always ostracized. We tried to stop the 503 because I know more is coming. I know the pipeline's coming. They're getting ready for all these stuff. That's why they want all this energy in our area. But nobody sees the impacts. I know where he's coming from when the drugs are destroying our children. Our people are happy to go to work in Pias. They get the training. But one small mistake or whatever, you get kicked out for a year. The agreement said they signed was 100 man years. That went out the window in the first 3 or 4 months. Man year is when one person gets hired, they get fired, that's 1 man year. That's how they described it to us. And the people that work there, some are happy, some do it because they need the money. Because our employment rate is very 90%, less than that, more than that. And I looked at my grandchildren. What have we done? what have we done to our children and our grandchildren? But the consultation process they did was not right.
Connie, did you want to respond to that as well?
Sure. My thoughts have always been on consultations that it's non-existent. You can't have meaningful consultation when two parties come to the table with completely different agendas. You know, since first contact, Indigenous peoples have come to the table to negotiate and try to work with people and you know, all of the colonizers, and have time and time again been disappointed and disgusted by the conduct of the federal and provincial governments, crown corporations. A good example, you know, the gentleman sitting on this panel speaking so openly and honestly about his experiences and is a really good example by, you know, the promise of jobs. And what they don't tell you is that you're going to have the jobs, but you're going to be the one shoveling. You're going to be the one cleaning up the garbage, and you're going to be the one that's going to work in the camp cleaning the toilets. You're not going to be the one that gets the big job at the end, but you can have this job. And it's really vitally important to also be mindful that, you know, in our case with Site C, there were several nations that were involved in the court case. Now there's the Provident River First Nation, West Mowgli First Nations, who are still involved in litigation with BC Hydro. But you can't, you also can't hold to task nations who are living in deep poverty, who've made agreements. They're doing what they believe is best for their nation because they are living in poverty. And you can't begrudge them for trying to hold on to that last hope that this one time that they're not going to be crooks. And sadly, time and time again, it is what happens. You know, you can't have meaningful consultation when one side is unwilling to actually mitigate serious consequences and overlook serious situations that occur when projects like the Sensi down in Kiosk. I remember going to York Factory and speaking to some members about their experiences at Kiosk, and it was absolutely horrifying. What was occurring to the young women and girls at the camp, and everybody was turning a blind eye. And that happens straight across the board in communities where mega projects come in and there's camps, and the women, girls in the communities are exploited. And now in the last probably 10 years, we're starting to talk about that. And we're starting to talk about what is happening to our young women and girls and men in these camps, the racism and the exploitation that's occurring. So when you're thinking about consultation, we really need to be mindful that it's a word. It's a word that they use, and they're very well with it, because they're very successful in Fort St. John, saying that they've consulted with all the nations regarding the Site C Dam. Well, my idea of consultation, our idea of consultation, means that we have a meaningful conversation and we come to an agreement that fits for everyone. Not, here's what we're going to do. You're going to like it, you're going to accept it, you're going to take this amount of money, or you're not going to get anything at all. That's not consultation, that's bullying. And that's the way it is. And I'm thankful for having opportunities like this to speak about that, because the more that we rise up and have that voice and the opportunity to say, you know what, no, that's not consultation. You're going to actually sit down at this table and you're going to talk with us, and you're going to mitigate these impacts because they are real and our children are dying, we have to be strong and we have to stand united for that and really take them to task for consultation, because that's just a word. It doesn't exist.
Robert would like to speak, and how are we doing for time? We've got about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to take some questions. I'll just turn it over to Robert, and then I think Denise would like to weigh in as well.
Consultation, monopolized by lawyers and consultants. That's what I think of when I hear consultations. Lawyers and consultants making millions and millions of dollars off of people who normally wouldn't have the means to have that kind of money in their pockets. A few, select chosen few, selected to sit in on certain meetings away from communities, behind closed doors in secret courtrooms somewhere off far away in southern cities like Winnipeg. Maybe in a lounge, maybe in a bar, maybe in a hotel room, maybe off on the outskirts of a hotel somewhere far away from downtown where other people can't get to as easily as they could. Bipole 3 consultation. We barged in on it, my wife and I, one time. We didn't know what was happening that time at that Bipole 3 consultation hearing we heard about. But I knew my dad was going there, and I knew damn well that I wasn't going to go there and listen, because I didn't know that there was a phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. When we barged in there, they told us that they were at phase 3. This is before the blockade. We are at phase 3 on Bipole 3. I asked, excuse me, where the hell did phase 1 and 2 go? How the hell did we jump to 3? Our people don't even know anything about this consultation process that you claim that our people know about. These are the sort of dirty, underhanded, underside of politics that you normally wouldn't hear about, that you have to know about, happens all the time. It's a dirty world of politics. Under the tables, deals, sweetheart deals, backroom deals, you call them, they've happened. We're all part of that legacy that's happened. Some of our own people have sold us out. Not just from our community, but yours and yours as well. Taking that envelope, that check, travel check, honorarium check, whatever you call it. That's been done, and that's how we got to some of the processes. That's how we got to where we are today. Those have to be talked about too when you talk about that dirty word development, that other dirty word consultation. That's just a means to get your hands in a piggy bank is how I see it. If you're going to talk about consultation, the consultation should be taken to the people, the grassroots people, and not just the politicians and the frontline workers. It has to be taken to the grassroots people. The politicians like myself, the chief and council, we're employees of they're our bosses. That's how we see it. They're our bosses. We do what they say, but we're the mouthpieces. We bring their messages to the south for the politicians here to hear those messages that we bring from the north. When I hear consultations, I think about Bipole 3 agreement when we barged in. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to. I want to share a story. At that consultation hearing I was at, they pushed things on our elders at the time, my dad being one of them, in English. And a lot of the elders who were there didn't understand much English. So they sat there nodding their heads like this. My wife and I looked at them, and even my wife said, I don't even think they understand understand, Robert, say something. I said, kasi din, nainti ko yung amoy ng mga taipeta, awitun sa gade, kitas kinaw. Do you understand what it is that the words that they're saying here to us in this boardroom today that they want to do to our lands in the north? Mods? No, they said. And we said, hey, wait a minute, hang on, it's not fair that these people don't even understand, our elders don't even understand what's going on here. How is it that you can jump from phase 1, 2, and 3 and not be able to share the message that you're trying to convey to them and twist the words around and make it sound however peachy you want to make it just so that you can pass phase 3 and not even give our elders the full benefit of being able to understand what it is that they were there sitting for. So the people at that meeting, they said, oh, never mind, we'll have a question and answer period at 1 o'clock today, come back at 1 o'clock. So that was it. We went back at 1 o'clock, but guess what? No lawyers, no consultants, and no community representation from our community. Our elders are left standing outside the hotel on the sidewalk. Some of them are inside. Some of them waited for 2 hours for a part 2 to that meeting, for the question and answer period that was supposed to happen that never happened. They shut it down because they didn't want them to ask any questions. And so all the people that were in that conference room were part of that consultation process. Even my wife's name and I bet are on that list on the people that got consulted. But those are questions that have never been answered. And you say consultation process, I just say it's a piggy bank for lawyers and consultants to benefit from. Enough of the lawyers and the consultants, we need to do this work on our own. Bring it home to where it really matters. Take it to the communities to where it really matters, to the people, to the grassroots people. That's where the consultation should happen, not in boardrooms down south here in Winnipeg. Not on free shopping trips or bingo trips. Free trips to the south to go play slots or bingo, drink, party, live it up, whatever. That was it.
I think we're out of time. Comments to Denise to wrap things up succinctly, and then feel free to come and talk to panelists and ask them questions afterwards. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I know that we are going over time. I'm not going to, the story is the same, wherever it is we are, but there are parts of this, so I want to bring it back to UNDRIP. Because I think UNDRIP, we need to be very, very careful of what's happening in our country right now and how UNDRIP has become the buzzword and we're going to make this Canadian legislation. Let's be very honest and clear. Since colonial contact, it has been about how they take, whether it's been the doctrine of discovery, whatever language they have needed to use and take to put laws in place that make it okay for them to continue doing what they're doing. The story of the dog resonated with me because I had that blood memory trauma that lives in all of us. Back from when they first formed the RCMP, why they formed them was to force us into community. They started the dog calls of the Inuit people as my people. And when the injunction came in place in Labrador, I had 2 of them from this sort of secrets, this investigative division, whatever it is they do when the injunction comes in place, and they saw me as a key player within communications, and so they showed up at my door. My dog was outside and wouldn't let them up my driveway, which is really rare, but she's a good judge of character. So she kept them down, and I had to literally pull her in, and I got her in the house, and I kept them out on the doorstep. And of course, we're learning our tools, right? The phone comes out, we start recording them. We've had to learn very quickly how to try to protect and defend ourselves within these colonial systems. And as they finished their conversation with me, they made the statement, that's not going to be a problem if we try to come back here? Or if we need to talk to you again? And I didn't understand why it hit me so hard. When I went in the house, I broke, and it took me days to try to put myself back together. And that was I was talked to some of my spiritual guides, and it was that love memory trauma. That's the way they control, the way they intimidate. And I'm not a person that's easily intimidated. But this is what they do. And so when we talk about UNDRIP, we talk about consultation, we talk about free and prior informed consent, we need to look very carefully through this document that the United Nations has created, because there are loopholes. And the biggest one is the word established leadership. What established leadership looks like in a colonial context is to put the people in place who they can get the rubber stamps like you're talking about. It's not talking to people. And even within that document, I mean, there's stuff that they still won't listen, they still won't, like, within UNDRIP it talks about being able to, governments can't take sacred space, and space that's used for traditional ceremony, or place that has artifacts. Up in Muskrat Falls, our way, over 80,000 artifacts have been found, and they were boxed up, presented to the First Nations elders. We don't know how many or what happened to the Inuit artifacts, but we know that they're there. And the same thing, so they took over 60 different trail systems, camps that were canoe-making camps that were some of the artifacts are over 3,000 years old, that much history, and it's gone. I mean, there's a box full of stuff, but those trails, you can't recreate that. And I want you to remember that in the comparison, look at our UNESCO World Heritage Sites that exist within this country. The one that's in Labrador is Red Bay, and it was one child of a Basque whaler was buried there. And because of that, that entire community now is a World Heritage Site. It can never be compromised. And they've turned it into to come and see how the Basque whalers lived. These were people who came and took from our people. So we have to be really cognizant of the language that gets thrown around. Because I'm pretty sure if we were to ask the question across this panel and throughout this room, show of hands, how many of you ever gave your free prior informed consent to these projects? So don't let them use that language against us, and you're right, we have to break down these systems. What I see is a complete overhaul. This idea of consultation is updating. It's not, we're told after the fact, because we did everything humanly possible in Labrador to stop this project. And at the end of the day, they found their loopholes and they did it to us anyway. That's what's happened to every one of us. So how we mobilize, how we fight back, I'm all about that. Because it's about protecting this for the unborn and for our elders. We have a responsibility. And that's why I'm here, and I'm pretty sure that's why, by show of hands, let's go the other way. We'll end on a positive note. How many of you are here because you know it's your responsibility to protect land and water and lives? So we're in the shared circle.
Thank you, everybody.
I just wanted to make one last comment here. We know all the injustices, and hydros, the industries are depending on us to continue to just sit back. We can't do that anymore. And as soon as we show any signs of strength, they're afraid. We've seen it. We put a blockade up back home. You should have seen how fast they moved to fix our road. Because that road that they were destroying was killing our people. And I want to talk about our road. You know, you see these paved roads in the street. As soon as they get damaged, they jump up and fix it. That's their highway. Our highways, the rivers, and the lakes, who's going to fix those when they're too badly damaged? We can't forget that. Because when our highways are damaged to the point where people can't live anymore, what's going to happen to us? Are we gonna go around all looking like this? Let's start working together. I realize that we need the money to survive, but only to a certain point. We need to think about our children that are suffering. And we have to start working together and helping our children understand what we're fighting for, what we're advocating for, what we're praying for. In ceremonies, we pray for this. And we need to all do the same, because the more we do it together, the more they're going to stop destroying our land and our waters and our children. And our grandfathers and grandmothers that have gone before us are there to help us, so we need to stand together. Because I like my water. I don't want to live without it. But I don't want to have to worry about getting sick when I drink it. Because it's happening everywhere. And those lawyers that come to the communities and show beautiful pictures like they did in our community, that's all they do is show pictures. They don't actually think of the human damage that they're doing and the damage to Mother Earth. She's human too. Our water's human. They have spirits, and we can't forget that legacy.
I've just been told that our next speaker is held up in customs, so we are going to have a bit of a Q&A, and I'd ask anyone who has a question for one of the panels just to raise your hand, and I think there's somebody with a roving microphone at the back there. Anybody have a question for the panelists?
Are you able to?
Thank you. This will be for the lady here from Site Sudan. I have a question in regards to, you'd mentioned the whole thing about how these projects, what happens to them, and it's been vague also, but that's what I've mentioned about the impacts on women and girls in your communities. I'm wondering, like, what kind of awareness are you doing? Like this is, it seems like it's an unspoken thing that's happened in our communities when hydro and mining projects, any kind of construction projects come in. But my question is what are you doing in the sense of getting the information out there? How are you incorporating it into your schools? How are you educating the kids when they go out to school? How are you sharing it with us as other communities on how you're dealing with it so we can learn from it as these projects move around and come into other communities? Because we all know what's happening, but the thing is we talk about our strength is in numbers, but how are we all working together to collectively deal with the issues that you're raising with that?
So personally, like, because what I do for work, I work as a Northern case manager for missing and murdered women and girls for Indian Residential School Survivor Society. Big, long, huge word. Currently, we are trying to develop something to go into the school system to talk about impacts on women and girls, and also bringing the young men into it. Because we often have all kinds of workshops and things for our women to make them strong, but we also need to be mindful that without bringing our young men along, then all that work will be for naught. So we're also developing an Indigenous gender-based analysis toolkit to help people to understand those actual impacts and to help mitigate them. A lot of people are really unaware that there are actual social impacts to women, girls, communities, men when these projects come into town. We have what they call a ghost population of probably 2,000 to 3,000 people that come into our region and work. Those 2,000 to 3,000 people make upwards of probably a minimum of $3,000 every 2 weeks. And you're looking at people that work sometimes 10 and 4 or 12 and 2 come into town, unwind. Our women and girls are unsafe during those times. So it's raising that awareness. That's primarily what my focus has always been, has been on that social aspect of it and the impacts of that. Because like I couldn't spout off a bunch of numbers of how much the dam is over. I can tell you how many women walk into the Women's Resource Center after having been raped by a worker that they didn't know that was in Fort St. John. You're born and raised in Fort St. John, you know everybody. It's like every other community, you know, everybody knows what everybody's doing. You know when it's a stranger that's in town working. You know, so it's those kinds of things that I've always been focused on, and now we're really trying to get that to our young people. The safety, even being on the internet is unsafe. You know, like those back pages and Facebook and Snapchat and all of those things that make our kids unsafe when there's this whole new world that's out there. So working towards trying to develop programming for our youth to keep them safe. We have unfortunately, you know, we've created a missing and murdered persons toolkit, so that if somebody goes missing in one of the communities, they have that readily available, what to do, who do you contact, write this down, here's a poster. And unfortunately, we have to create those kinds of things for our communities, whereas the average person doesn't have to worry about their children going missing or being raped or murdered. You know, I got into recently over a Halloween costume where a lady was arguing with me about dressing her daughter as an Indian princess. And she said it shouldn't be insulting. And I said, well, just so you know, we're 5 times more likely to go missing or being murdered, so you might want to rethink your daughter's costume.
Thank you, Connie. We have another question over here.
Just two questions, I mean, basically, panel. One of the, my experience with just been saying about consultations, you have to understand, question this yourselves, and try to understand this question. What does Section 88 of the Indian Act says to you? Okay, Section 88. Okay. And second question is just, what is it or what is a reserve? They'll know why your consultation doesn't work. Thank you.
I just want to speak a little bit about what was said here. And I know your question, but I'm going to say that in our community, you know, when we were growing up, we weren't told about the water, the earth. We were shown how to respect our water, our life. And that kind of got lost along the way because of the curriculum that tried to make us all English-speaking people. Whereas in our culture, our language, everything's there, all those teachings, the respect, and how to look after our land, our water, and to understand what the elders are telling us. In our community, we're starting to move forward with that by using our land-based education to teach our children to respect the water and to understand the damage that hydro and all the other industries are imposing on us. This is the movement that we're going forward with in our community. It's going to take a while because we are always being pushed to be the mainstream society and forget about our language and about our culture and about the respect and how to work together. So this is what we need to start doing. is educating our children so that they're not forced to sign things or agree to things that are not beneficial for our communities. And about our reserves. Before colonialism, there wasn't any boundaries. We hunted everywhere. We were able to go, we weren't restricted to stay in one part of the land. And we need to respect that. Some of our people still need to learn that. Because when everything's taken away from you, when you have a little bit, you hang on to it. But years ago, we all shared. We had everything. And I think that's why that our elders, you know, when they used to go out to these meetings, they were given money and they felt that recognition. But that recognition was not in the right place. They felt good because they were useful. Because their usefulness had been taken away through our education system, by residential schools, we know that whole history. So we need to move forward and stop trying to fit into that box that they will all want us to fit into. We have a whole world out there. That's our culture, that's our education system. That's our livelihood. And this is what we're trying to promote with our children in our community. Everything.
Denise would like to weigh in, and then we're going to take one more question and have a break.
Thank you. So just to follow on that, what are we doing to help educate and to connect community and from that side mobilize? And I will say in reference to your question, I don't, being Inuit, our government systems are different. So Section 88 or being on reserve, we're not in reserve. So I'm going to leave that to people who know a little more than me to answer that question from that piece of it. Because I don't feel it's really my place to give an answer to something that I don't have a lot of knowledge on, so I apologize for that. But for the piece on what we've been doing, we've been talking a lot, so it's using social media and encouraging a full conversation to be happening and holding sharing circles and really about being authentic, I guess. So I work as a youth worker at the Labrador Friendship Center. I run youth programming. And when I go in to run my programs, I'm not just Denise, the youth worker. I'm my whole self. So that means we have conversations and you know that, you know, I have to take days to go to court because of the civil charges, because of trying to resist this life I have. And what that's creating is that we have youth who are starting to, you know, write their own plays, bring their own music forward. And I think it's the empowerment piece, that intergenerational skill sharing, bringing in mentoring, bringing in role models, and not just people who are the sort of what's the best way to put this? Sometimes we're told to bring in educators. We are our educators. You know, we are the knowledge holders. Youth have a lot of lived experience now because of what they've had to face in the world. So honoring them as knowledge holders and letting them be the ones teaching us too. So it's really been about that, but also trying to spread out the message as much as we can. Live stream is a powerful tool to show what's happening. I mean, that's how I think of how I know what's happening in Manitoba, what's happening in BC, how anybody knows what's going on in Labrador is because we have found the tools that normally they could come into rural and remote communities and we wouldn't know about each other. So I think that's a big piece of the education, and then pushing back, whether you're a parent or a person in your community, of getting involved in school districts, getting involved in municipal politics, or any of those things where you go and attend the town council meetings, hold people accountable. Like we have to start becoming a part of that conversation with youth. way, I think, and not allow people to make decisions for us or have conversations with our kids for us. There's a group, NCCIE, who's helping build Indigenous education tools to be brought into classrooms. So 6 Indigenous youth that I work with are making their own films about what does it mean to them to be Indigenous. And that will be brought into classrooms across Canada is the goal and the hope. So I think it's looking at how we spread out the message of education and then talking in a real way about sustainable energy or green energy or hydrograms or whatever the case may be. We have to really have real conversations and connect the dots with all of us.
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing back home in our community to try and share what's happened in the past, to try and share with the youth is the land-based teachings programs that we have going on in our community. We have some of the programs that are going to be happening soon and within our community, but also we're going to be taking our youth out of the community. And we just recently bought our own plane in our community of Split Lake. That's what we did to get our youth and our people, to help them get away from the damages and the devastation that they see happening on the Nelson River itself. Because we live in the toilet bowl of the north. We drink this recycled water. Every time you piss and shit in this city here, it ends up over there in Split Lake on the Nelson River. It's the toilet bowl of the north. I can't put it to you any more smoother than that. It's the plain truth. We're now building camps away from the community. We have Recluse Lake that was flooded out in the flood of 2017 that we proved to Hydro that it was their fault that they flooded that camp. We got the monies from Hydro to rebuild that camp. We got monies from Hydro because we were able to prove that it was their fault when they flooded South Indian and quickly released the flows from Missy down to Churchill. But there's a lot of other things that I'll have to say before I can explain what you're asking. Same with Tommy's question there. Iskunigan, leftover land. Agisian ni Goya, always to be my story. Agimi ni Goya aski that we were already on, that we already inhabited, that we're told that does not even belong to us. Even by our own people, I hear that. O may sinipa yan, o may siyap yan, o tano sa skiwa, naginagit de bente. It doesn't belong to you because you signed the treaty. You gave it up. Guess what? I don't give up.
I've just been told that our next speaker is here and we need to wrap. I invite you all to come and talk to the panelists, to ask them more questions, and then